Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unbottleneck, the podcast where we solve common digital marketing problems. And today, our guest is Jake Bohall. Jake is the co-founder of Hive Digital. He discovered Hive Digital, now then known as Verante, and basically he was a client seeking marketing advice, and he quickly fell in love with the search engine marketing industry and its ever-changing environment. Over 13 years of experience in SEO, as well as his own experience in founding several startups, ranging from insurance services to a social network for wine enthusiasts. And this makes him up to identifying practical online marketing strategies to fit a company's growth objectives and available resources, which, from what Jake told me before the call, is something that he loves to do, especially for organizations that have a real cause behind them. Jake, do you want to talk about that just a little bit? It sounds like your target audience isn't just anyone with a budget for digital marketing. It's like there's a certain type of client you're going after. You want to talk about that a bit?
Sure.
And
Thanks,
welcome to the
Steve.
show.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you mentioning that. You know, as an agency, there was certainly a period of time in our younger years where we would do anything for anyone, as long as they had a check to go behind it.
Right.
I think as our agency has gotten older, and quite frankly, the executive team is we have families and those things now. We've really found our passion in helping companies that we feel are making a difference. I like to be able to go home and brag to my kid, like, Daddy's working with this company that does, facial recognition software, and they help stop, child trafficking, those types of things.
That's amazing. I know we've worked with a few clients, and we talked about this a little bit before the show, but we've had some clients that were in like the healthcare industry, and one of the things that they would do is fly to third world countries and help give people back their sight, if they were eligible for it, or they would help battered women if they needed cosmetic surgery. And it's always such a great feeling, when you work for a client that's giving back. You feel like you're doing something that's helping the world and not just trying to generate a paycheck. And not only does it help build a better culture, I think, in the workplace, because everybody loves what they're doing because it helps other people and doesn't just put money in our pocket. But two, it helps you sleep better at night. You wake up the next day going, I really love, that I've made a difference in the world. And I think that's such a great mission, for everything that you're doing at your company. And
Yeah.
today I know we're going to be talking a lot about SEO. But I think that's just from a high level something all companies should think about, right? Do I really enjoy working with these clients? Am I only working with them for the money? Are there clients that I could work with that have a better mission that I can buy into and make a difference in the world? I think it's an interesting mindset.
I, I appreciate it. I do want to think that it's also worth noting, as an SEO doing marketing, having a client who does something awesome makes it a lot easier to do things like link building, right? So like when you're
Right.
sending out those emails saying like, hey, like, check out my article, will you link to me? It's a lot easier to do that, when you're, representing a doctor who's, literally, saving children's lives,
Sure.
than some guy who's trying to hawk, an oil for your dog's skin or something.
Always the best link building strategy. We've even worked with attorneys where we did some things to help the community. We gave away bicycle helmets to kids. We did a CPR class. We did a blood drive.
Mhm.
Any little thing that you can do for the community, regardless of what business you're in, is a great way to make it easier for the folks that are trying to earn links to do that. And for local businesses, not only do you get the link, but you get the mention of your name, address, and phone number too in that process, particularly if it's a local event. So I think that's a great point. I think when you're working with brands that make it just so easy to earn links, compared to those that are just like just point to bottom line sales pages, and I don't need upper funnel content, and we don't need all that. Just make it rank, make me number one. You're like, those aren't the clients we want, right?
Exactly. And it's a lot easier to do actual ethical white hat link building when you have
Oh yeah,
clients that you can be proud of, right? Because everybody's excited to help.
for sure.
So it,
Well, our first
there is a
question. Oh,
benefit.
go ahead.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say there is a benefit, internally in our SEO efforts, to having clients that are either already implementing those sorts of strategies or who are excited and open to taking approaches that are really about
Oh
giving
yeah.
back to their
The
communities.
buy-in. Oh my God. When you get a client to buy into it and they're as passionate about it as you are, that's fun because now it's a collaborative effort. We're all on the same page, and I love that.
It's awesome.
So, SEO works best with a team in place. And you've mentioned unmanaging your SEO team, even referencing the matrix and those red pills, which I do all the time, by the way, the red pills, the blue pills, and rabbit holes. Can you walk us through your vision of a strong, successful SEO team?
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I think for the record, I run an SEO team for a smaller agency. So my experience is limited to my team and the in-house teams that I manage as a vendor. So, in some ways, I'm still learning whether unmanaging is an effective tactic, or whether it's maybe a great excuse for me to give my team autonomy. So that being said, I do think it's important to know that in building my team, I've really tried to just like focus obviously on the people, and talent, transparency, trust, and training.
Yeah.
So with the talent, like the SEO industry is really fractionalized, and it makes it different or very difficult. So we've focused on making sure that we have somebody who's an expert in technical, someone who's an expert in content strategies, offsite, internal politics, data analysis, and so forth.
Right.
And then looking at making sure we have transparency in the team. So we do something a little bit different at Hive. Like we have a shared inbox. So like
Okay.
all of our clients, we ask them like, hey, can you copy this project management inbox? It helps us keep track of things. But it also means that everybody gets to see everybody's work. So it creates on one side this like really collaborative environment. On the
That's
other
that
side,
transparency.
we get to see when you screw up or like make a recommendation that doesn't work, or you have a failed or exciting experiment, like everybody kind of gets to share that as a team. And we do cover some of that stuff in a weekly meeting of like what's working, what's not, sort of agile framework. um, and then I think trust and training, like we're not a mill. So
Mhm.
each person, and this is something that we really try to do different, and a lot of the new employees we hired from other agencies like spoke very highly of this, and that each of our consultants manage their own clients to
Mhm.
stay on a budget, to be accountable to themselves. And we basically let each of our consultants run the projects like they're a freelance um,
Nice.
contractor. So the idea is that we are an agency, we're here to support you, but you come in and get to know the client, get to know what's special about them, and
Mhm.
you find out what's going to work for them, what strategies, reporting style, deliverables, and so forth.
Sure.
And then you've just got everybody around you if you need something, but like it's yours, and you should live it and breathe it like that is your client
And
forever.
that's so unique because so many agencies have just the opposite. And I've worked for a few of them, unfortunately, back in the late 2000s, where they'd say, okay, here's your team. You don't get to choose them. Here's your budget. Here are the tools you're going to use. And you're like, well, wait a minute. To be effective for this kind of client, none of this is going to help. I'm going to need to select somebody with experience in e-commerce. I'm going to need to select somebody who has technical experience with with working with product data feeds or something, right? So yeah, I'd love that you give the person who's leading the account the freedom to run it in the way that's most appropriate for the client, as opposed to working with a really rigid framework that can make it really difficult to be successful, because not every SEO strategy is going to work for the same clients.
No, and you can't. I mean, and you can never go into a project like with a checklist, right? Like, I mean, like there are things that we have to cover. Like, do you have Search Console set up? Do you have analytics? Those sorts of things. But going through and saying like, okay, let's make sure that we do all of these aspects for a technical on-site audit
Yeah.
first, and we have to do this for keyword research. Like sometimes people, they're on a budget, they're in a hurry, they only care about one
Mhm.
product. Like you learn the client and then you adapt. Just like from a political standpoint, red pills and blue pills, you have to learn, as a consultant, whether or not, you can give your client a red pill. Like, can you tell them like, hey, your site sucks or your product sucks, and like you're going to have to change everything at a company level, or we're not going to rank the site. I had a client who like ranked number 3, and they were really upset about it. And so I was like, so do you think you're better than, and I insert,
Number one, number
right,
two.
ranking number 1 and number 2. And they're like, well, no, but like, we do this. I'm like, okay, well, we're gonna have to focus on fixing all of these other elements if you
Right.
genuinely want to rank better than everybody else, because Google's not going to put you at the top and then have everybody complaining about your business. So like we have that side, and then you have like the blue pill where you have, I mean, historically for us, like on the ignorant standpoint, where like sometimes like with link development, or even some like checklist SEO stuff, like as an
Sure.
agency, like sometimes the client just wants something very specific because they I don't know how political you get on your podcast, but like they read it in a Neil Patel article, and so
Sure.
now like you have to do that, and so we have to just ask them like, okay, like do you want a red pill or a blue pill right now? Like
So that's awesome, because then you're being 100% transparent. You're giving an analogy so that they understand kind of where you're coming from and what you're doing. But yeah, you're always going to get those cases where someone read an article somewhere, and I've been lucky enough that most of our clients that come to us trust us, even if we say, yeah, that probably would work in some circumstances, but based on what we've found in your industry and with your website and with the things that we've been doing, that's probably not the appropriate path to take. But we'll add it to our little down the road test, if we don't see results from what our existing recommendations are. And most of the time, the clients are like, great, well, thanks for getting back to me. But you're right. Every so often, you're going to get that one account that says, well, I read this thing, and sometimes that's the beginning of the end for a client. Sometimes it's a agree to disagree, and shake hands and let them bounce between 20 other agencies in the next year, and then you hear
they'll
back
come
from them a
back.
year later.
Yeah, they'll come back when they learn. I mean, like the number of times that I've had clients like leave on those exact same principles and then come back and say like, "Hey, actually, like let's try this again."
Yeah.
And I think each of those is a learning opportunity for my team members as well. And I
Mhm.
mentioned the autonomy side. To have an effective team, I think it's important that you create a system, like a
Mhm.
framework for the agency that they can be creative and they can be themselves. Because SEO, to be effective these days, like you have to have creativity,
Oh yeah.
and you've got to be able
Math, art, science, and creativity is the way I've always kind of looked at it.
yeah, exactly. You have to be able to dive down rabbit holes and explore random stuff and see what happens and try new things, and also to have like training opportunities. Like I do a one-on-one with each of my team members each week. So we do like a weekly meeting
Okay.
where we just sort of go over like what are your project's priorities, wins and fails.
Yep.
And then I do a one-on-one with each of them to say like, what are your roadblocks? And when they come to me with a roadblock, it's generally either something that I need to do, like I haven't done for them, or it's something that they're struggling with, like individually. And so it's a
Mhm.
great like training opportunity for me. So like every week, I generally get to screen share like solving some problem that someone on my team had. And then they do the same, our dream scenarios
Because
that
they
each of
won't they
them.
won't speak out, will they, Jake? You have to have that meeting, because they, for some reason, I don't know if they're just intimidated or they feel like he's busy enough and I want to bother him. But you're right. If you just force it, if you just say, I'm going to spend half an hour with you, and if we don't use it, we don't use it, but I'm going to lock it out and see, kind of how your week's going and what you're doing and where some of your roadblocks are, and that sort of gives them the opportunity to say, you know what, I've got some time that they've made for me. I can use this time and try to get my questions answered. That's a brilliant idea. I honestly don't know anybody who does that. That's really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I can say with confidence that it has made a huge difference with my team and both being able to meet like deadlines and so forth with
Hmm.
their clients, and then being able to meet my own sort of personal expectation that I'm mentoring, because it was really easy for me to just like get into my own zone and forget my team because of the whole autonomy thing, and it just like I had to fix it, and that was the strategy that I used, and so far it's been working out. In my
I
opinion,
might need to
and the
try
feedback
that.
I've gotten, it's been
The
working
the one
out.
thing that we've done that's worked so far, but it doesn't give them the opportunity to train with me directly, which I do need to start playing with. That's a great idea. But one thing we do is we have accountability partners. So
Mhm.
instead of hiring a manager or a leader, at the beginning of the year, we sit down, we assign accountability partners. In fact, we haven't had to reassign any of them. At the last time I said, do we need to switch partners? How are you guys feeling? Do this anonymous survey. And everyone's like, no, I love it. We hold each other accountable. So every week they jump on a call with their accountability buddy, and they talk through what they're working on, what their challenges are. They look at the project management system. Hey, I see you have all these things that are in queue. Do you need to redelegate or change some of the dates on any of them? How can I help you? I'm your QA. Do you want me to review some of your work and
Yeah.
what you have going on? And
So
that's been super effective.
is that like there's a dedicated person for
Yeah.
each?
hmm
So
and it's different because the person who's your accountability buddy will be a different person that you're an accountability buddy for.
Mhm.
That way, it's
So
not the same person.
it's interesting because we do something kind of similar. So I mentioned that each of our consultants like gets to run their own project. As you can imagine, as an agency, like there's
Yeah.
liability there, and that somebody's going to go on vacation at some point.
hmm
And so we have two policies that we put in place. One of them is I don't expect anybody on my team to work more than like at an 80%
hmm
like workload, just so that they've got time to cover for other people.
Sure.
The other is that for each project that you manage, you pick a backup. And like in our case, we do more of like a voting system. So like a new client comes in and it's like,
Okay.
it's pitched internally, like this is a client. Do we want them? What do they stand for? Blah, blah, blah. And then like somebody says like, I want that one. And then there's like a second consultant that is intended solely to run as the backup person. And
I
so
see.
they stay up to speed on what's happening because we share this inbox. And then because they're the backup, that sort of partnering happens in accountability because like if person A doesn't get it, like I'm looking
Yeah.
at
B's
person
got to know what's
B
going on.
and say like, hey,
Yep.
like you gotta cover, like if they're overwhelmed, like you have to cover it. And so they end up working and holding each other accountable on those fronts. And it's different for every project
Yep.
based off of, like this client is heavy technical and some content. So a
Right.
technical content person will match up, or this one's heavy content and linking. So then a content
hmm
authority person matches up.
Very interesting. So yeah, you try different things. The accountability thing worked for us as a good starting point, but man, I gotta try that. Maybe I'll start with like 15 minutes and see if I need to do more. But I have enough meetings on my schedule to have to pack it in. But it's so important to give them that opportunity. And when we do the team meetings, it's awkward quiet sometimes, right? Because no one wants to step up and ask for help. Um, One of the things that in fact, we've discussed this before, and you've discussed it a lot online, is this idea of an SEO pyramid, right? Can you take us through this whole idea of an SEO pyramid, explaining what really matters in SEO and where we should focus our experts? And we'll make sure there's a visual element of this too, so people can kind of see what we're talking through. But talk about this hierarchy of SEO and how it's the first time I've actually seen it and heard about it, and I'd love to kind of share that with the audience.
Thank you. Yeah. So I did some training for Fortis College in this boot camp course for SEO, and one of the things that I thought was important was just creating a in this case a graphic, for example, that would really explain the fundamentals of SEO. And I've used this with clients who are they know that they need SEO. They're like, what does that even mean? And it's really that there are these core tenets that we have to cover. Like first, foremost, like the base foundation of SEO is crawling and discovery. So that's like our
Right.
technical SEO and making sure that
I think it's chapter 2 of the textbook I wrote, so I'm with you.
which is good. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Right there at the beginning. Like
uh,
before we can rank for anything, Google has to be able to actually see it.
right.
So just making sure like that part of like the discovery part of your site is in place and Google can
hmm
index your content. The second most important aspect for our perspective was content and relevance. So making
hmm
sure that there's a solid link between the intent of the user and the query they're doing, and then converting them through the search to your landing page with targeted messaging, whether it's your description, whether it's
hmm
like the heading when they land there, whether it's the actual delivery of the content or service or whatever it is.
Right.
But that ultimately from the title through your conversion action on the site, you're delivering on the intent for whatever keyword that you want to go after. And this really has helped a lot for like we've had clients that they want to rank for pool, and
hmm
we're like, okay, like is that a swimming
I want to
pool?
rank for the word the.
Yeah, it's always something random, and it's always something
Right.
that like you've got like the
I tell
arborist.
Rolexes I need to be on the first page for the word watch,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
in a week.
exactly.
Can you
Or
do it?
time. We had,
Yeah.
what time? And it's like, what do you mean you want to rank for time?
How long's your site
Um,
been around? Well, I haven't created it yet, but can you do it by the end of the month?
so I think a lot of times it's that particular level, that second step is where we really help customers sort of like come to terms, like we feed them a red pill on like, do you actually do and serve the audience that you think that you want to serve? And that, keyword research and stuff kind of falls into there. Um, and then you have like experience and vitals, which this one's a new layer in there, which is Google's efforts, everything from mobile first indexing
Right.
to site speed. The prediction is that at some point we'll probably see like accessibility metrics. We've already seen security,
Hmm.
security with HTTPS. So like that is, in our opinion, something that you don't have to have to rank, but
Sure.
it's those things
It's
that are
accommodating all users, right? It's privacy, accessibility, security, and mobile friendliness. Those are principles of what we do in technical SEO. So you're right.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, and making sure that you've got that. What is the one thing, if all other elements were equal,
Hmm.
that is going to really make the difference? And that's going to be your
The
customer's experience.
tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then the cherry on top, which I think if you show that graphic, you'll see it. The cherry on top is links or authority. It's the thing that we're not supposed to be able to manipulate. That as SEOs, obviously, we spend a lot of time trying to manipulate. But it's really, when Google
Influence,
is
Jake. Influence, not manipulate.
when
We're influencing results. We're not
we're making casual
manipulating.
suggestions by means of links. So if Google has found your content and they've filtered all of the web by this thing that they think is relevant,
Yep.
and they've applied this layer of what they think will actually meet your experience, so like the device that you're on.
Mhm.
Ultimately they're going to have to come back and then say, like, how do we sort the list? And that's where the authority metric comes in. And so
I love it. That's such a
that's
great idea because it's like you can't get to that second, third, or even fourth layer until you've ensured that the site can actually be found and crawled and your page is going to get indexed. And you shouldn't be working on links if you haven't even established what content you're going to have, because what are you going to link to, right?
exactly.
So this is great. I love this format, and I think it's a perfect visual for anyone who's sort of new to SEO, or if you're trying to sort of train the different stakeholders, your writer and your developer and your digital PR folks. I think this is a great framework to establish what's going to be involved in our
You
SEO
know,
campaign.
and I
Yeah.
think as SEO, one of the other reasons that we put links last is obviously like priority of things that we control versus those that we don't, and where we should apply budget and that sort of thing. But it also has given us the ability to defer link building
Hmm.
towards later in our engagements with clients, which is really, really helpful. Like, because it allows us to actually see what naturally occurs. So like it's amazing how much rankings shift when you fix on-site elements. And we ran an experiment many years ago to prove to ourselves that we could rank a picture with no text, like on the page at all, if
Yep.
there were enough links pointing to the page. So like you can throw steroids into a runner, and they will win a race, but at some point an injury is going to kill them, that sort of thing.
Hmm.
And so like we really want to focus on this sort of like bottom up approach to SEO, and both the tactics that we use and the timing that we use to deliver it, so that it's really about ensuring that we are going through these steps in the order that Google would be finding our content and weighting and ranking our site.
Makes sense. Yeah, I love it. Well, you've mentioned the blurred lines between SEO and general marketing, and seeing SEO as part of your DNA versus being viewed as a campaign or a channel. Can you break that down a bit for us?
Yeah, so SEO isn't just a review process. I think is the easiest way. As I've worked with larger and larger clients, like initially, actually, let me back up. When you work with a small client, you end up
Hmm.
being stuck with a responsibility for everything. Like they want you to manage their email accounts and their hosting and the design of their page. So like
It's true.
we got sort of stuck as a smaller agency and growing, like that, like all of these, every client like expects you to do everything. Like your grandma thinks because you do SEO, like you can help her install an app on her iPhone, and like that's your job. So clients end up doing the same thing. And so like we sort of had to learn some general marketing stuff. Now with SEO touching every aspect of what a site is doing and delivering and the experience for the user, like we've moved from like those clients that expect you to do everything to like
Mhm.
now you actually do need to be involved, and like where are we hosted, how is that affecting site
Yep.
speed, are we using a CDN, are we pre-rendering,
Mhm.
where are
Are we throwing
images.
Nitro Pack on this
Yeah,
to amplify
exactly.
it for
Are we
core
using
vitals?
rocket loader or not,
And who's
like
paying for that? Whose account is it? Is it marketing at your domain, or is it, you
yeah.
know, an email address with us, right? It's yeah, there's a lot,
Yes.
behind it.
So we've gone from like this stuff where we were just having to do it because they expected it, to like now you actually do have to interface in a large company with every single department,
Hmm.
because SEO is touching everything from where the site gets deployed to the delivery of the services to the client, and like how we can leverage that delivery for feedback and reviews and links and all those types of things. So like now, when like my personal role at Hive, I spend a lot of time with a few really large clients where I am doing politics a lot of the time, and they thought internally like, oh, like what stage do we put this in Jira? Like there's going to be a task, stage for a task in Jira where like, okay, now we SEO it. And so we had to break down that idea with, like one, that the hierarchy of SEO sort of pyramid, but also approaching it because we would run into things where they were trying to launch a program and we'd say like, you already have that program. Like you're coming to us when it's in demo test, or in staging environment. And the reality is you should have come to us when you first had this idea, because you've already done it. Like it's already live on the site. It just sucks really bad, and we need to rebuild it there. Or
And you're
like,
right. And you're right. There's a lot of politics there too. When
yeah,
you look at the different team members and approvals and budget approvals and stakeholders, as you get into larger businesses, it gets even more like that.
and the equity that your primary contact has in the organization, right? Like that's also going to dictate red pills and blue pills, where it's like, do we just let it roll and fail, and then when they can't figure out why it's not working, like then we get to come in and fix it? Like obviously not the ideal scenario, but a lot of times like people have already been hired and budgets have already been set, and like that's a train that you can't stop without hurting a lot of people's feelings along the way. And so, fortunately, as the agency, or unfortunately, um, we don't have like an actual interest in their internal politics. So we get to kind of play this role of neutral third party Switzerland, where it's like, here's some reality, and what are you going to do with that knowledge? Let us know how you want us to handle it, but we have now delivered to you,
Everything we promised, but it
yeah,
isn't pushed through because of
exactly.
internal politics. Yeah, and sometimes you just have to let it go. Sometimes when you do your monthly meetings, you bring up the point, the suggestion, the page, that you'd recommended, and you keep it on there, and you say when you're ready, we've got everything that you need ready to go for this, and here's what the forecasted value could be based on search volume, your average order value, an average click through rate, an average conversion rate. Take all those numbers, and here's a forecast of what this page or this particular thing could mean.
Mhm.
And in having that, a year later, you look back and you're like, so here's what we could have had, X million of revenue or whatever from that incremental from getting this page up. So do you want to try that this year? Because that could have meant in 2 years X, dollar amount. So yeah, you're right. Sometimes you just have to quantify things to push things through, and other times it won't matter. Other times it's, well, we'd have to rebuild our system to do that, or we'd have to get another third party to come in because we don't have the technical resources to do that level of coding that you need. So yeah, I feel your pain.
Yeah, and there was a really amazing presentation. I can't remember who it was. It was somebody at Botify that
Okay.
did this presentation talking about they get to see a lot of different organizations and all of their data and output of how they perform.
Hmm.
And the presentation was discussing the companies where DNA is, or excuse me, the SEO strategy is like dictated from the top. So it's like where SEO is like, this is going to be a part of how we approach all the things in our company, versus the SEO as a footnote. And it's a great deck. I wish I remember who did it, but they're essentially making the very clear case as to the success that you see when somebody has an idea in the organization. You're like, does this have an effect on SEO, or at least
Yeah.
letting the SEOs get involved so that you avoid a lot of hurdles and things like
Yeah,
that
it's
along
it's
the way.
tough with larger organizations too. It's such a brand heavy SEO environment when you look at the search term reports and so forth. So sometimes it's more difficult to bring in non-brand opportunities, and sometimes even the smarter developers will come back and say, "Well, I know you want to optimize for the word kids shoes, but it's such a broad word that we're probably not going to convert very much of the traffic. We're going to need more server space to get that kind of traffic. And you're just like, all right, so I can't win every battle, right? But I can tell you this is what it could mean. And brand visibility is a good thing. It's upper funnel. It's going to, allow for remarketing and your marketing automation. It's a great thing. It's not a bad thing to have a low conversion rate for a high volume search term, but developers sometimes don't think that way. They're very mathematical and not as much about big picture.
How many
So
how many
yeah, I'm
keywords
with
do
you.
I need on this page?
Yep. All right, next question. What is your strategy for overcoming enterprise SEO challenges? We already talked through a couple of them, like getting the executive C-suite level buy-in across and cross-department collaboration from companies you work with. Is this something? Is it something most of us come against time and time again, or is this sort of a random thing?
Yeah, I think whether you're working with like a single, entrepreneur, like a
Hmm.
solopreneur who is, you've got to get them to buy in to prioritize the tasks that you're asking them to do, or you're in a large organization that's, some multinational with departments all over the world, and you're responsible for all of their organic traffic. So I think regardless of what you're faced with in terms of the client structure, you're
Hmm.
always trying to figure out how to get buy-in and so forth. And you mentioned it a moment ago, Steve, that researching potential impact. Like, when you're trying to get the C-suite to buy into something, like the number one thing you can do is point to,
Sense of deficit.
this is where you've lost. Yeah, like,
Uh-huh.
like here's an example of where you did this wrong. Like, and I love, I don't appreciate this from my clients, of course, but like, I love having those moments. Like we had a client whose server went down for like 4 or 5 days,
Hmm.
and when it came back up, their rankings didn't recover, and
Oh,
it took, I think it was probably like 3 or 4 weeks before Google trusted them again, and they were ranking at the top for some highly competitive e-com keywords.
right.
Like, obviously they were beating out like Amazon and stuff. And so like, of course, when they disappeared, Amazon comes back, Google starts seeing great click-through data for them as well.
Yep.
So anyway, we had a perfect case to point out to the client of, listen, when you botch something with your delivery of the site, this is the potential income
Mhm.
loss and rankings loss. And even if you put it right back, is within 5 days, this is the type of residual impact that it can have. So we had that actual data, like real life data, to show them like your site went offline because one of your servers, the power line got chopped at the data center. Like it was really not their fault, but it was enough to be able to make the case of like, this is the practical impact that
This is why
happens.
redundant server redundancy is so important.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think so. One is kind of like what you pointed out, like showing the research for potential impact and potential.
$1.2 million, Jake. That's how much we showed one of our clients when their their menu section went away because
Mhm.
a developer put in a no index. So $1.2 million over the time that it took to find out that it happened, to get it back up and working, to re-index it, and to get it ranking again. $1.2 million, and it was over the course of, I think it was about 2 months. So yeah,
Yes.
that's impactful. Even in new opportunities you want to present, not even just the thing went down.
Yeah,
Oh, weird.
we had a client that they took a free trials button out of their navigation, and because somebody didn't like the fact that it stood out and this sort of, like people get bored with their own sites. I think, just to digress for a second, people get really bored with their own sites and they want to make change for sake of change because they're tired of looking at it. And so they're like, yeah, that button's been there forever. People know how to get to our free trials page. It's just,
Yeah.
click, click, click. They lost, they went from the delta was about 30,000 visitors a month that they lost to their free trials page. It's like, so like painful lessons, like those are obviously great ways to get buy-in. The other thing, and this is a bit more, I have struggled with it at moments because it's manipulative. But a lot of times, like it's just taking justified baby steps, right? Like, so like we have a client that we work with that we've been trying to get them to transition to like user-centered design. We're trying to get them to build these landing pages, and like it just wasn't working. Like we presented it all as a big project, and like
Mhm.
that we don't have time for that, like that sort of thing. And even saying like, well, here's step one, like the project itself was so overwhelming in scope, and it felt like it was going to change so much, and ultimately it was going to be like a homepage redesign and this sort of stuff. And so they just said no. And then we went back over the next like couple of months, and we were like, okay, we're going to do a content audit here. We're going to do some conversion rate optimization on this page. We want to build a tagging system so we can personalize content for the user.
Right.
And then ultimately, we basically created like 20 little mini projects that we could pitch and sell for reasons outside of SEO, like the tagging for personalized content. Like that was for us like internal linking.
Sometimes you have to do that.
Yeah,
We call that flanking the client, right?
yeah,
So
exactly.
yep. And sometimes you'll have this big page that you want to completely overhaul. And instead of being able to push it through because there's so many changes in it, you start by baby stepping. Hey, let's throw a little video in here. Hey, let's change this. And within like a year or two, the page is what you wanted it to be. So sometimes,
It's
so that's
fascinating.
one solution. Baby steps, crawl, walk, run. The other thing that I've done too is when we do our monthly reporting with our consulting accounts, we'll start with a slide that's educational, right, for
Mhm.
the stakeholders that are new, or just to remind them, here's why we're doing this, and here's what the potential is and why we're even talking today. And then we get into analytics, and then we get into tech and content and links. But that educational piece, particularly on the year end, where you get those higher ups, those C levels that come in, those educational slides are so important for them to
Mhm.
see the visual of what we're talking about. Show them a screenshot of the search results and a competitor outranking them, so that they immediately go, why are we not number one? Let them ask the questions so that they're getting buy-in through the answers. And I think
Yeah,
that's
we
so
one of
smart.
the things that we did in that same vein for a client, like we couldn't rank for a particular keyword because it was a keyword phrase that Google had considered a comparison a query, and they were not ranking brands for the
Hmm.
query, right? Just they were ranking comparison sites. And so, what we did is we then went and engaged with each of those sites and the classic barnacle, link building strategy. And
Hmm.
so we were able to show the executive team like, no, you don't rank for that, you won't rank for that. But
Yeah.
here's what we did do. For each of those sites, when someone clicks on it, you rank number one on their page. So now you have like 10 number one rankings instead of the one that you were really going after.
It works so well with Yelp and TripAdvisor, and sometimes it's not even the linking. Sometimes it's just taking the time to maximize the fields that are available in some of those profiles. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and
Um,
funny enough, that was our way around this particular client wouldn't create a comparison page on their own site because they didn't want an apples to apples comparison for one of their competitor products because
that's where
they
you get back into the
they
be a
weren't
better
better.
business.
Yeah, yeah. So like coming back to the honest route of like, why are we here again?
Yeah, I love that. All right, last question. Can you catch us up on any of the new or time-tested SEO tools that are taking your efforts to the next level? You mentioned Botify before. We've used them. Is that one of the tools that you feel is
Yeah,
sort of a time-tested tool or
love.
something new?
Yeah, absolutely. Love Botify. I mean, Botify is not new per se, but
Right.
they're constantly adding new features. I think in the last like 3 or 4 months, they've rolled out a number of new features for helping you automate,
Mhm.
identifying particular issues that are being impacted
Sure.
from an SEO perspective, and then showing the potential of or showing like what exactly that's impacting. So like this issue impacts 25% of pages that generate 50% of your traffic and some of
Mhm.
those types of things. Botify as a whole, like just the roll up of all of the data in one place, like I have found that platform to be invaluable for my enterprise clients. Small clients,
It's a great dashboard tool, and initially started out with just crawling, right? It would crawl
mhm,
your website, and there's alternatives too. If you're looking at a tool that's going to crawl your website and identify all of those different crawl issues and duplicate content problems and accessibility, Botify is one of them. Deep Crawl is another. We use one called Ryte, Ryte,
mhm,
and then there's some clientware that's a little bit, well, a lot less expensive, but can crash your computer for larger websites like Sitebulb and Screaming Frog. There's even another one online called SiteLiner. If
mhm.
you're a smaller business, SiteLiner gives you a lot of free data to start with, um, but they're all very similar in what they offer, and everyone's kind of got their own thing of what they like or dislike about another. But I've heard good things about Spotify, and I haven't checked into Deep Crawl in a while, but they were the industry standard originally. I think back in the day.
Yeah,
Now they're probably the most expensive.
there's a number like SEO Clarity and stuff like. There's a number of tools that are out there, like adding some of the crawl features. Screaming Frog's fantastic. for any small site, like that's the first tool I go to. For large sites, there's a couple of people on my team that
It's
have been
great for
working.
prospecting too, Jake. For those SEO agencies out there, use Screaming Frog, find errors, find issues, use that as your intro. Hey, notice some things you might want to fix. All of a sudden,
There,
they're like, "Whoa, you just gave me free help. Thank you."
yeah, it's true. You can also run Screaming Frog in the cloud, by the way. So
Mm,
like if you're worried about crashing your site, you want to do a large site, Screaming Frog can be effective for that. Content
nice.
King is another tool that has really been it's just saved my tail so many different times. For those of you who aren't familiar with, I'm assuming you're familiar with it, Steve, or
I've heard of Content King, but I haven't used it.
okay, yeah. So I think their tagline is something like, because SEO never sleeps or something like that. And it's essentially a persistent crawl of your site. Botify
Okay.
just added this feature. I'm assuming because of Content King. But effectively, you put in your domain name and
Hmm.
it crawls all of your site and then it queues a crawl just like it's Googlebot. And so they determine like the priority of pages based off of your internal linking structure. And then they
Hmm.
recrawl all of your pages and you get alerts for changes and they snapshot a change. So you can imagine like as an
Interesting.
SEO with clients who go rogue, right? Like Joe decides he's going to go change his
Oh,
homepage.
they never go rogue, Jake. They're always perfect.
Yeah,
Why would
between
they want to block the robots with the robots TXT block the whole website? Why would they do that? You know?
that's funny. Yeah, I mean, there's like we've used tools in the past, like I think like visual ping.io and stuff like
Mhm.
that to like alert me when a client's changing a site. Content
We've got
King.
visual ping for every single client for the robots TXT. Every
Yeah.
single one.
So
Yeah.
you could get rid of that and use Content King, and it would be
Cool.
even better because then you would get like, here's the change for the robots, and it stores a snapshot of the robots text over time,
Nice.
all in one dashboard, and you can do
I'm guessing it does code too, where visual ping's really more the rendered image, I think.
yeah, you get to do both. So like they'll render the DOM, like for source code, like they'll
Okay.
look at changes in the render DOM as well as changes in the original source. I've actually the biggest thing that I have found with Content King where it's helped me the most is with science or with clients who have their load balancers out of sync. And so
Mm.
we would start seeing this like weird inconsistency where it's like I get an alert, get an alert, get an alert, and I would look and I'm like, this isn't an issue. And then with Content King, like they store the headers and everything for you to check out. And so I would look, and then we were
Nice.
able to figure out like this site, like one load balancer was out, and it had like no data. So like it had like no index tags on it. It had like the wrong.
Oh,
And so I think they ended up finding out it was like one of their dev sites had ended
yeah.
up in the load
Usually a staging
balancer.
or a dev. Yeah.
And so you can imagine for Google, like, in this case, we ended up running some testing and found like 20% of the time they were serving the wrong site.
Yeah.
So like not good for Google. So like I would say Botify, Content King, Market Muse,
I've
um,
heard of that one.
like those are some of the big one. Obviously, the Screaming Frog and so forth. Oddly, I don't think anybody talks about like project management for SEO. Like we use a combination of Asana and Harvest and Jira
Okay.
with clients, and like we use this
Jira seems
platform.
to be really popular. I'm gonna have to look at ways that agencies and consultancies are using Jira, and how they're creating dashboards to be able to see everything. We finally moved off of, we went from everything from Basecamp. One of my favorites, by the way, was a system called Igniter with a U,
Mhm.
Igniter with a U, and it was great because it allowed you to have a PM system with task management, and it also had integrated reporting from multiple data sources, Moz and Ahrefs and others. But it wasn't very mobile friendly. And for those of us that are constantly on the move and out and about, we don't want to crack our laptop open to be able to collaborate on a task management system. So
Yeah.
we eventually moved back to Monday.com, and now it's just a simplified, easy view that's customizable with custom fields, and we're not sort of confined to your standard PM system, and it's perfect for marketers too, where Jira is really heavy for more developers. So
Yeah, we
anyway.
we, we use Asana and Harvest, and I think when we first started using a PM software, we used something that's called Dot Project, and this
Okay.
was in like 2005 or something like that.
Oh wow.
And we Frankensteined this thing together until this past January. We
Okay.
finally changed for the first time in what, like 15 years or something. We changed to Asana and a combination of Asana and Harvest because we were trying to make it like mobile friendly and things like that. I ended up building a mobile version of the app so that we could have it on our phones.
Still actually use it.
It's,
Yeah.
yeah, but eventually we were like, this is crazy. Like, why are we? I mean, it was free because we hosted it ourselves. That was a motivator. But there's so many cool project management tools out there, and like for us, we change for all of our clients. So like,
Mhm.
I have some clients that like our PM is for us, right? But like for our clients, like we jump into their Basecamp or their Monday or Asana or Jira
Yep.
or whatever,
We do the same. In fact,
tool.
we'll even invite them to ours, but because mainly we're just consulting, so it's a little bit easier. They don't have to micromanage what's being done because most of what's being done is being done by them, and we're just consulting.
Well, exactly. And our goal as an agency is to take customers who like and create a process for them, right? So like
Yeah.
we've never been the agency who like we create a Google account for you. Like we're like you create it and you share it with us. We
Hmm.
want to be, kind of an add-on to your existing systems and help you train and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so the idea of working in their PM tools means we get to help them create a process internally so
Yep.
that ideally for them they could wean themselves off of us, and then I'm just here if you have any problems, sort of thing.
Or for that once a year delta. Hey, could you
Hmm.
tell us how we're doing from when we started?
Yeah.
And I love that.
I like clients who are successful at taking all of your advice and implementing it and so forth, and then they get to implement internally, and they call you when there's a
And you're not
significant
you're not
change or a
hijacking their
problem.
marketing like some of the agencies do these days. We won't mention them by name, but I think we know who they are.
Yeah.
But yeah, it helps you empower and teach them how to manage search, and when they need you as overflow, as to fill the gap when they're between resources, or maybe they're at that point where they're like, you know what, we just trust you to just run it and manage it. You're still the wingman. You're not someone who's going to hijack their digital marketing. You're just going to keep it running for them and earn their trust and get referrals. It's such
which
a different business model.
which can, like, I have a client who I thought that was what I was doing, and it turns out like we ended up like this is a client I'm very heavily involved in now, where it's
Yeah,
almost like I'm in house for them at this point,
it
which is
feels that way
great.
sometimes. I've been
Which
there.
is great. It wasn't intentional, but and I do enjoy working with them. But there is some thrill as an SEO and as an agency of being able to work on new problems and new challenges constantly, right? And like for every client,
That's why we do it.
yeah, for every client, it's different and it's fun, and that's why I love SEO. Like that's what caught me
Well, this has
in the
been
first place.
amazing. I got a lightning round for you really quick, but
Okay.
before we jump into it, is there anything right now that you want to kind of share what you're working on, or maybe how people who are listening um, can use your services? Are you guys taking new clients right now, or
Um, right this exact moment, I mean, I'm going to say it's August, just in case somebody's listening to this later. It's August 2021.
uh,
One of my team members is out on paternity leave, so for the next like 30 to 60 days, probably not taking on any significant new
for the
projects.
lockdown? Hmm.
But after, when we get closer to the fall, like absolutely, love to take on new projects. We're always looking for a fun challenge. So like if you've plateaued, if you're trying to develop an internal process, if you're trying to just determine like how do we approach fill in the blank, like technicals,
Sure.
content, so forth. We love to get involved.
What's something on on your website right now that you, if you were to say, hey, you got to check out this one thing that we wrote or did or produced or tool we created, what's something that you want them to check out?
Oh, that's a great question.
You
Um,
had something before when we were talking years ago where it was this neat tool that helped you look at your link profile, or back in the
Yeah,
day.
with remove them probably.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
we
right.
we had it. It automatically looked at your backlink profile and determined like a percentage toxic sort of thing.
Is that still around?
It is, yeah, it is. It's definitely still around. I don't know. It's funny. You and I were talking before the show
Uh-huh.
about like cobblers and shoes and so forth. So like
Yep.
our site, my team has like taken it on and been working on it, which is fantastic. I haven't really been heavily involved with it. The tool side of our site has not been updated externally
Sure.
the way that it should. So I would say the last like 4 or 5 years, we
Mhm.
have spent all of our energy improving our internal processes and how
Okay.
we approach clients and like what we do as a company. So off the top of my head, I can't think of a tool that we have that I would be like, yeah, you definitely you definitely need to go get this one. I think we like rank for some stuff like, duplicate
Sure.
content tool forever. But it's kind of, I mean, that's a
No
baity.
worries. Well, if you have something after, let me know. I'll drop the links in for everybody.
Okay.
So my quick little lightning round questions. You already answered one, like what are your favorite tools, right? You have several of those. I think are great. Next is going to be who would you recommend we follow if we're, if we want to stay on top of our game? Who do you follow right now, and who's really giving out some great content and good thought leadership in SEO?
Yeah. So, personally, I spend a lot of time following, and they're local SEOs for me as well.
Mhm.
J.R. Oaks at Locomotive,
Okay.
Patrick Stocks, who he was at IBM, and now he is with Ahrefs. So those are like my first two like
Go
go
to.
to anytime I have a question. And then there's like the Bill Slosky and
Hmm.
let's see, like Nick Eubanks, Paul Shapiro.
Okay.
Yeah, like that. Like if you start following one or two of those guys, you'll definitely start to see like that
Follow the rabbit
circle
hole
that
of, yeah.
exists. Yeah, because I mean, and for me, I follow them because they're at a stage and at a level with their SEO that like I want to get to, right? Like JR and Paul and
Or
those guys.
Bill and his patents. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
like they're doing something that I don't have the time to do, or I haven't gotten there yet, or I don't have the knowledge. And so I follow that group. So like, if you are interested in Python for SEO, if you're interested in just like with Patrick, like Patrick's brilliant, and he's constantly presenting this sort of like um, I don't want to say it's basic content because it's always so insightful, but it's like he takes a concept like internal linking or title tags or something like
So
that.
you're relearning something the right way, it sounds like.
Yeah, well, and with something that like you never really thought of, and so
Right.
he takes like very like it's almost like um, relearning some basic concepts, but like with like all of the experience that he has developed over the years, and so like you'll learn something about like, hey, if you do this with your title tag, like like you could put emojis in it, something like
That's
that. That
cool. Yeah, we've
um,
done a lot of those kind of tests too. We love it. Well, what is one SEO myth that drives you absolutely crazy? That everyone's like, this is an SEO ranking signal, and you're like, there's just no way.
Um, well, I mean, like there's like some normal like meta descriptions, where people are because it's and this is the opposite where it's been noted that it's not an SEO ranking factor,
Uh-huh.
that they tend to get ignored, and it has such a heavy impact on click through rates. It
Hmm.
is how you sell the customer to come to your site,
Right.
and it's so easy to change and to test
So
using
the
a
myth is that meta descriptions are not a ranking signal. And you're the
correct.
second person I've talked to actually in the podcast series that has said meta descriptions are super important. So
They,
that's
they,
that's
they are,
awesome.
they're technically not, I ran an experiment and, Google does not index the content of a meta description. Like you put a unique string of characters in a meta description and a separate unique string on the page, like Google will surface that page for the result that has the content on the page, but
Hmm.
not for the content that's in the description. So like
Right.
definitely not weighted at least at all. But the impact that it can have on the
On
searches
click-through rates
experience.
and yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So I think that drives me a little bit mad. I run into a number of instances where clients think that after a certain amount of time, you don't have to worry about redirects, whether
Mm,
it's maintaining them or recovering them. And there's been some things kind of back and forth with Gary Ish regarding, like
yeah.
what happens after a year of like finding a redirect or not. And in my real world, empirical experience, every single time that I run a crawl and find either whether it's internal 404s or like use something like Ahrefs, Broken
Mhm.
Link Explorer, um, and you implement those redirects, like traffic, you just see the traffic go up.
Yeah.
And so like everything points to it most definitely has an impact, regardless of whether they've got like an actual dial that
Yeah.
says, when this link gets recovered, like it makes the difference or not. Like
Sure.
I don't really care. I just know that every time it does have an impact. So I think those are the
Jake, this
top
has
two.
been a lot of fun, my friend, and I know there's so much more that we can talk through. We didn't even really get into like toxic links and cleaning up suspicious links, which is something I know you're like a genius at. Perhaps we'll save that for another podcast. But anything else that you'd like to kind of share with the audience, and how can they find you if they want to just kind of follow you and hit you up with your handle on social?
Cool. I'm at Jake Bohall on Twitter. You can obviously visit hivedigital.com, and you'll find us there. And I will say, because I don't know if you said it or not, Steve, but you've got a book.
Uh-huh.
You've got a book out that everybody should go and check out. Um, so those would be my parting words. Like, check out Steve's book and follow me on Twitter.
Or for my textbook, you actually have to get it from your college, so it's through
Oh, you
students.
can't. We can't
So
even buy. I'm sure we can go
not
buy it
yet.
from like a
If you're in
course.
school and you want to use that textbook as a guide, as a teacher or a student, you're more than welcome to. But my second version of that's going to be more paperback. I'm not starting that one until June of next year. So taking the year off to get some time with the wife now that the kids are back in school. So,
Okay.
well,
Well, for
Jake,
those of
thank
you who
you
are
again.
interested, I'll start a secondhand market for Steve's
There
book.
you go. Awesome. Thanks for being on the show today, and this was so much fun. And we'll definitely catch you on the next episode.
Great. Thanks, Steve. Take care.